Remember when a simple mobile game about flinging birds at pigs became a cultural phenomenon? The red bird plushies were everywhere, the ringtone was inescapable, and seemingly every kid had it downloaded on their parents' phone. But what you probably didn't know is that the entire empire was built on borrowed ideas, and the decisions that followed would ultimately destroy everything they'd created. Let's rewind to April of 2009. A small game called Crush the Castle quietly launched, introducing a simple but addictive mechanic. Players used a trebuchet to launch projectiles at structures sheltering enemies. It wasn't revolutionary, but it was fun. 8 months later, a Finnish game developer called Rovio released something that looked suspiciously familiar. They called it Angry Birds. Now, was it a blatant copy? Absolutely, the core gameplay was identical. But here's where Rovio deserves credit. They understood that execution matters more than originality. Where Crush the Castle felt rough around the edges, Angry Birds was polished to perfection. The graphics popped with vibrant colors and smooth animations. Each world had distinct themes and escalating difficulty. The scoring system rewarded efficiency, encouraging players to compete for high scores. They introduced 5 unique bird types, each with special abilities that added strategic depth, and that soundtrack. It wormed its way into your brain and refused to leave. The transformation from copycat to category killer was swift and brutal. Within 2 months, Angry Birds dominated the paid app charts in 60 countries. For Rovio, this was nothing short of miraculous. They'd released 51 games before this, and every single one had bombed. They were on the verge of bankruptcy. Angry Birds wasn't just a hit, it was their lifeline. So naturally, they squeezed every drop they could from it. Angry Birds Seasons arrived. Themed around holidays, Angry Birds Space took the physics to zero gravity. Angry Birds Star Wars mashed up 2 pop culture juggernauts. The strategy worked brilliantly. 6 to 7 million paid downloads rolled in during that first year alone, generating over $10 million in revenue. But the real genius move was understanding that the game was just the beginning. Fans demanded merchandise, and Rovio delivered. Plush toys sold out within months, with 60,000 units moving in the first wave. The birds appeared on t-shirts, backpacks, lunchboxes, and every imaginable surface. Celebrities like Justin Bieber publicly endorsed it. They even introduced in-game purchases, including the mighty Eagle Power up that let players pay to skip frustrating levels. By the end of 2011, Rovio's revenue hit $100 million. Their workforce exploded from 28 employees to over 200.5 months later. They shattered records by becoming the first mobile game to reach 1 billion downloads. They doubled their revenue again in 2012. Everything they touched turned to gold. Then reality set in. The formula was getting stale. Despite releasing multiple versions, the core concept hadn't evolved in 3 years. Players started getting bored. The novelty wore off. In 2013, their profits collapsed by more than half. Angry Birds plummeted to 59th place in the App Store. The golden goose had stopped laying eggs. Desperate to innovate, Rovio took a risk with Angry Birds Go, essentially creating their version of Mario Kart. Professional reviewers gave it solid scores, and players called it one of the best entries in the franchise. Encouraged, they followed up with Angry Birds Epic, an RPG that again received praise for trying something different. Players appreciated the fresh approach after years of the same slingshot mechanic. But there was a critical problem nobody anticipated. These new formats didn't sell merchandise. The slingshot gameplay was instantly recognizable and translated perfectly to toys and apparel. Racing games and RPGs not so much. Merchandise sales cratered. Total revenue dropped. Trophy plunged 73% to just $10 million. Rovio laid off 14% of their workforce, and headlines declared the Angry Birds phenomenon was fading. They tried another experiment with Angry Birds Pop, which bombed spectacularly. When fans were asked to name the worst game in the series, Pop came up repeatedly. Rovio realized they needed to return to basics. They released Angry Birds 2 as the official sequel, but they made a catastrophic miscalculation. They stuffed it full of aggressive monetization. Ironically, despite the negative reception, Angry Birds 2 became their highest earning game thanks to those same predatory monetization tactics. Yet somehow, Rovio still posted losses of nearly $15 million that year and fired another third of their staff, over 200 people. It seemed like the end. Then came the surprise resurrection. Rovio had secretly spent 3 years and $73 million developing the Angry Birds movie. It was a massive gamble. Video game movies had a terrible track record, but with a star-studded cast and a surprisingly decent story, the film defied expectations. It grossed over $350 million worldwide and thrust Angry Birds back into the cultural conversation. People rediscovered the games. Theme parks opened internationally. Media declared 2016 as Rovio's best year ever. The franchise had been saved by Hollywood. But the gaming side continued its decline. Post-movie releases introduced new character designs that longtime fans hated. Games like Angry Birds Fight were dismissed as shameless Candy Crush clones. Angry Birds Match was called extremely bland. The Reddit threads asking about the worst games in the series repeatedly pointed to everything released after the movie. Surprisingly, older titles remained popular. Angry Birds 2 saw revenue growth of 47% in 2018 despite being 3 years old. This success funded a sequel movie with a $65 million budget. Unfortunately, lightning didn't strike twice. Critics savaged it as worse than the original in nearly every way, describing it as distressingly ineffective and increasingly tiresome. Still, it managed to turn an $82 million profit. Then Rovio made decisions that truly enraged their fan base. Despite older games requiring minimal maintenance and remaining popular, they stopped updating them entirely. Without warning or explanation, beloved titles including the original Angry Birds vanished from app stores. Fans were devastated. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Compilation videos declared Angry Birds was dead. Social media exploded with hashtags like #BringBack2012. The outrage forced Rovio to issue an apology, claiming they removed games because maintaining quality updates wasn't possible. The excuse satisfied no one. Under pressure, they eventually released Angry Birds Classic in 2020, too, but with a catch. It cost $2 and they renamed it Red's First Flight, making it harder to find in app stores. The strategy was transparent and cynical. By burying the classic game, they hoped to funnel players toward newer titles packed with microtransactions. Some players fell for it, unable to locate the original. Others saw exactly what was happening and called it out publicly. The accusation was simple. Rovio eliminated the old games to force players into the monetization, heavy modern versions. They'd betrayed the games that built the company and lost the franchise's soul. Rovio essentially admitted as much in their official statements, explaining they changed the name due to the game's impact on their wider portfolio. They encouraged fans to bring their passion to live games like Angry Birds 2 instead. The response from players was withering. Someone translated the corporate speak as, "Please play our psychologically manipulative game stuffed with microtransactions instead." The controversy apparently killed future development. Angry Birds Classic from 2022 remains their most recent release. In 2023, Rovio was sold to Sega, but the acquisition has done little to repair the damage. Recent fan comments capture the mood. "I still love Angry Birds, but the current state is terrible. My hope for the franchise is at an all-time low. It's sad seeing what it's become." Interestingly, Rovio just announced a third movie is in development. Whether it can revive interest in the games remains to be seen, but the broader lesson is clear. Success built on imitation can only last so long. When greed replaces passion and exploitation replaces innovation, even the mightiest empires crumble. Angry Birds soared higher than anyone expected, but their fall has been just as dramatic. The birds that once dominated mobile gaming are now just another cautionary tale about what happens when companies forget why people love them in the first place.